Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The
doctors
doctors
are
are
in.
in. In the U.S., there are over 5.4 million adults on the autism spectrum. In this session of Writers Group Therapy, we're speaking with the team behind the new film Plight, a post-apocalyptic Stand By Me that features 4 lead actors that are all neurodivergent. The film was written by Ron Sandoval, whose brother is autistic. Also with us is Emmy and Critics' Choice nominee and executive producer Katrina Wolf, and Get It Made Productions and Get It Made founder, producer, and director of the film, Matt Boda. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
What's up?
So welcome to Writers Group Therapy. We always like to start with our writer when we have groups like this. Ron, tell us how you started writing and how your path brought you to write Plight.
Plight is really just the beginning of my writing hobby and career, which started about 15 years ago. And Plight originally started out as a short story, but how the story of Plight came to be, I was working a couple different things. Was one, I was working professionally with the adult autism community, and then the second reason, which is actually the most important reason, is my younger brother, Eric, has autism. He has one of the more severe forms of autism on the spectrum. And so that's it, having both the professional and the personal experience, it really wove into my heart deeply. And and about 15 years ago, we had a lot of post-apocalyptic, shows and movies. It was kind of coming back on the scene, right? There was Walking Dead was about that time,
Mm-hmm.
and one thing that it kept occurring to me as I was watching these TV shows and these movies was, where is the developmentally disabled community? And just no one told that story, and that community wasn't even nearly mentioned in any of those stories. So I saw it as a couple of different things. As one, either they're not allowed to, maybe it was some type of taboo subject, which later I found out in the industry it is a little bit taboo, and um, or it was just difficult to write about. It was difficult for the industry to navigate a proper way to represent this community and honor them. And I think that's probably the larger thing, is it's difficult to navigate doing it correctly. And so the story, started. I started writing a short story that was very much was kind of, Plight 1.1, and revolving around basically almost a similar story of what ended up being produced. And it slowly evolved over the years, and to what we have today.
Did the story always have 4 main characters?
It actually had 5.
Huh.
Yeah, it actually had 5 main characters, and the fifth boy, which was his name was Charlie, he had the most severe case of autism. And that particular that partic- particular character was actually based off a real life person in real life, which I knew. He had a very severe form of autism. At one time, it was something like 1 in 15 cases in the United States of the most severe case of autism. So everything you can think of the worst spectrum, he had it. And so that character, or he was written into the story, and but as production developed, it became difficult to properly um, represent him.
Hmm.
And
It
rather
it
than
feels like in that sort of situation, the story becomes more about that person and their particular level of dysfunction than being a story about an adventure with people that are neurodivergent.
Hmm.
So that would take away from what you were trying to accomplish.
Correct. Yes. And one of the I'm happy that you said that. That's one of the reasons. And then one of the other reasons is to find an actor that would represent his diagnosis genuinely and with respect. That became very difficult. Right? I
Hmm.
didn't want us to have to have an actor not actually have those disabilities,
Hmm.
um, and and represent that community. I felt like it was a dishonor to that community. So what we ended up doing, while still keeping some elements of Charlie, we ended up cutting out some of his character traits into some of the other boys. So the character still exists. It's that now some of his traits and just exist within some of the other boys.
Interesting.
Yeah. Mm.
So the setting though, the post-apocalyptic world, the world building that you did, that these young men have to adventure through to accomplish their mission. Was that pretty much how you envisioned it all the way through?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. I think at the original Plight, just before we had refined it for it to actually be producible, it ended on a very similar note, and so I'm happy with the final result.
Great, cool. So then, how did you come to connect with Matt and get it made productions and Katrina?
I first met Matt about 5 years ago. And I'm sure Matt probably has some data somewhere, and I don't particularly remember. I know Matt and I talk about it like, I don't know, once a month or something, of where we met. And I don't remember exactly if it was like I saw his name on a forum or something, or he had replied to some other type of industry related platform, and I contacted him, and then he ended up having a great, what I view as an educational platform, and let's get it made. And then it just went from there. And we started working together, and I had already had a full story and a full complete script. Though I never had any professional training, his educational platform was able to help me refine my ideas and screenplay structure, things of that nature.
Cool. And Matt, Katrina, either of you want to speak about like what drew you to this project in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in there first. Get It Made is really a platform for storytellers outside the studio system, and it gives them a real world, sort of pathway to bringing their stories to fruition at the highest level. And Ron's correct. We met through the platform, and as people develop with the various feedback loops and the producers that are on our platform, when something gets really good or it's really interesting and the concept is sound, that's when it sort of comes across my desk. And when I got Plight, on my desk, I called Ron and I was like, "Listen, this is really cool." And Ron, I'm not sure if you remember, but we had like a really long conversation, one of our first talks, and I just remember getting choked up about just how hard it was to bring stories to life without being on the inside of Hollywood, and making shorts with your iPhone or buying a DSLR camera from Best Buy and making it with your neighbors just what it was of no interest to me. And I had had a long career in Hollywood as a member of IATSE, doing lighting and camera. So I had a good knowledge base of what it took to make a project at the highest level. So I called Ron and we just had this emotional conversation about how hard it was, that if we teamed up together by our powers combined, we could probably make something happen. And when Plight had gone through all of the feedback loops, because there's multiple facets to get it made. Obviously, you have to have a great script, and it's hard to write a great script. It takes a long time. The screenplay contest world is sort of one-off, opinions, and you know, uh, uh, for a lack of a better way to describe it, opinions are like people's rear ends. Everybody has one, right? So it's really difficult to decide when the story's ready. But through our feedback loops, we sort of use the law of averages. And when Ron's script went through that whole process, and when any writer goes through that process, they sort of get dumped out on the other side of, okay, we've got 10% of the work done. That 10% is a great story. Now we go into the other 90%, which is all business. And that's where a lot of writers get lost. And that's where Get It Made comes in. So the script, was solid. It came through. We decided to team up together and combine our networks. And when any script gets to that point, that's when I reach out to Katrina Wolf. And Katrina's just got a long history of filmmaking. She's worked at the highest level. She just really knows what to do with a great script. So I brought the idea to her. Interestingly enough, back then we were focusing on proof of concept films to package these projects and to showcase the potential of the long form material. And Katrina had done a couple of these with me, and I remember it just like it was yesterday. But she was just like, if you're going to spend X amount of dollars on another proof of concept, it's like you're going to find yourself in the same place that you've always been. Why don't you try to make like a micro feature? And that just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I just saw it as an opportunity. And that opportunity, I just drove forward with it, and I called Ron and I was like, let's rewrite the script. Let's get some notes of how we can make it into a smaller box. And then we sent Ron off to make those changes, and he came back with something very producible. We went and scouted a location that Katrina turned us on to from a colleague of hers. We went out there, we saw the place. Ron went back and wrote the story to fit within that location, which I think is a very smart thing for first time writers to do. It's like, limitations breed creativity, and what can you do with what you have? And after that scout and the rewrite, Katrina came in, and she just knows what to do with a good script. Especially through the channels, the true channels of getting a high quality project made at the highest level, meant for Hollywood. And then that's when Katrina came on board, and the rest is history.
Yes, cool. Katrina, did you have any other insight into what you thought about the film?
Well, I think that was a really good history and explanation of how I came on board. And just to back up, the way I first met Matt was he did a little work on. We had a movie called The Big Bend that I produced, and we had to do during COVID a day of additional photography out here in LA. So that was how we first met, and that movie I should just get a quick plug in for The Big Ben, that it's available on VOD for rental and purchase now, as of a couple of weeks ago. But so that's
Congratulations.
how, yeah. And then Matt reached out a while back, and kind of explained, well, actually I think it was at the premiere of The Big Ben, kind of started to explain the Get It Made platform, and what the goals were, and which sounded very interesting, and obviously something needed, as he said, when you're an outside, when you're a writer and are not within the Hollywood ecosystem, what do you do, like how do you even get into, how do you get someone to read your script? There's a lot of obstacles sort of inherently set up for anyone who's not an insider already. So I saw the value in that, and started sort of consulting a little bit, meeting with some of these writers, and I loved the concept of Plight right away. Well, first of all, obviously the idea of an all neurodivergent cast, which I'm always very interested in anything cutting edge, and sort of boundary pushing, something that's not been done, but also it's something very needed like that. But also, I loved the sort of dystopian element that Ron had come up with. I thought that was also fresh, to combine those two things. And yeah, it's sort of my fault that I got these guys started on the idea of making a full feature, but I really did feel like now then you have a whole movie, rather than in the current market, just in the realities of the market. If you It's great if you have a very strong proof of concept, a short to sort of bolster your pitch materials, but it's still not something, where you're like, hey, it's not easy to get it out to a wider audience and to monetize. So yeah, they worked really hard to scale it down, and kind of take advantage of the fact that it is dystopian. So there's this big open desert, and there's the remnants of, well, I'm using the word remnants, but there's the kind of this vast kind of wasteland that is left over after sort of an apocalyptic kind of upheaval and war. So I think it ended up really really working. So yeah, but again, I was just more of a support role as an executive producer, and kind of helping guide and do some of the legal work, and the not as exciting, but the
The less
the
sexy
things
stuff,
that you have
right?
to do behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ron, we're talking about the world building and the post-apocalyptic stuff. It's interesting because the story of this journey these young men have to go on is not anything unusual. I mean, I want to say it's unusual. It's the same, trials that anyone would have to go on. You got to stay alive. You got to eat. You got to drink. And the problems that they had are not, specific to their issues. It's just it's more, and anyone in those situations would have those same issues.
Correct. And that's what I wanted to keep it as. I wanted it to be a post-apocalyptic movie, and the characters just happen to have autism,
Mm-hmm.
right? I wanted that to be second. I didn't want to, for lack of a better word, pandering, right? And there's a lot of that right now. And so I didn't want to, four autistic boys go and have this journey, because then that's not really, I mean, it is their identity, but it's not them. They have names,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they have their own, character and story. And I didn't want that to be exactly their story. I didn't want it to be the focus, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just four young men trying to save their mother figure, and they just happen to have autism. So I think we did a pretty good job
Yeah.
at keeping it in that light.
And the actors were fantastic. I'll put the links in the show notes to the behind the scenes and some of the events you guys have done because they're such a great guys and they speak so well actually. But how was casting this actually? How was finding your actors? How did that process go?
Well, it was very difficult at first. I know for a little while, Matt and I were scratching our heads because we had, I don't know, would you say a couple of dozens of auditions, Matt? Until we found the boys, and thankfully we were blessed finding three of them under the same roof up in Bakersfield, California, through a school called Inclusion. And so that was great. They all knew each other, so they had this really natural energy.
Hmm.
And the other we found, that was James, Jacob Waltuck. We found him. He's based out of New York City, and we found him through a program. Matt, was it through Zeno, or was it someone that introduced us to Zeno?
Yeah, so I know the producer of Peanut Butter Falcon.
That's
Ah,
right.
okay.
His
That's
name
right.
is Lige Sharkey. And one of my best friends is this guy named Nick Hexum, and Nick Hexum's the lead singer of that band 311. And he's just all over movies and TV shows and in the rock scene. And I called him, told him what we were doing, and he was like, "Oh, you got to talk to my buddy Lige." So he connected me with Lige. And then, just interesting side note, and I love Lige, I love what he did, but um, he did tell me that my plan seemed rather risky,
Hmm.
because
Mm.
he had $6 million. He had Shia LaBeouf, one of the greatest actors of our generation, arguably, and 4 months with Zach Gottsagen, who was the actor with Down syndrome in the movie, to prepare. And he told me, he said, we did 40 days of shooting, and there were some days that Zach just couldn't remember lines, or couldn't perform properly, I guess, to their liking. And they had whole days that they got no footage. And so he sort of warned me that you're going to be doing this with, less than a $500,000, far less than a $500,000. You only have 10 days shooting schedule. We ended up shooting the movie in 11 days because we did have to go one day over. But he was like, I'm just warning you that this sounds like a disaster. And I
Mm.
was like, thank you. Thank you for that. I get it, but we are committed. And he was like, okay, well, why don't you call my buddy Will Halby, who runs Xeno Farms, which is where Zach Gosagan came from. And he turned us on to their one of their best actors over there, who's been he's the most theatrical in the film. And it was really interesting because he didn't know the other boys, and his character was actually that outsider, conflict sort of antagonist, so it just worked perfectly. And so that's how we came across Jacob Waltuck, was through Nick Hexum introduced me to Lai Sharkey introduced me to Will Halby, and Will Halby runs Xeno Farms.
Cool. When you show up in the middle of the desert with this cast and your crew, how did it go? What was the production process like?
Well, for me as a director, I had no time, no money, and I had to figure out how to win these guys over. And an interesting thing that just sort of came to me, I was thinking like the what's his name, the pet whisperer, the dog whisperer guy. You guys know who I'm talking about, right? The guy that
Cesar
is
Millan.
the
Cesar Millan?
what's his name?
Cesar
Caesar.
Millan?
Yeah, Caesar Malone, exactly. I went to Inclusion Films, which, by the way, Inclusion Films is was created by Joey Travolta. So John Travolta's brother. John Travolta had a son who was disabled, and Joey wanted to honor him, and so he created a school called Inclusion Films out of Bakersfield. And so I was introduced to Joey Travolta through a colleague of mine named Mark Velasco. And so I went up there and we did a bunch of auditions. And when we finally landed on the three boys, I went there and I met them. And I don't know what occurred to me to do this. Again, like the Caesar Milan sort of approach was to inch your way closer to the person to sort of win their trust. So the first thing I did was I said, "Hey, my name's Matt," to each one individually. Let's just say Chase Nicholas. I said, "Hey, Chase, my name's Matt. I'm so excited that you're going to be portraying Bart. Would you mind if I shook your hand?" And he was like, "Yeah." So I shook his hand, and then I continued with, Bart is a really important character in this movie. He's sort of the mediator between everybody, and like I think you're the perfect guy for it. You know what? Would you mind if I put my hand on your shoulder? And he was like, "Yeah, sure." So I gave him a little pat on the shoulder. Then again, one last time, I continued with, like, I just can't tell you how excited I am. You're the perfect guy for this role. You know what? Would you mind if I gave you a hug? And he was like, "Sure." So I inched my way closer to this guy, and in a way, that physicality, which is sort of like a trait of folks with autism or people with autism, is like that sort of barrier, that social barrier. And I broke right through that. And then I did that to each one of the other boys. And then I made them, not made them, but I asked them to do that with each other. And I think it broke down these walls. And they, from that point on, they were just in it to win it. And I went up there a couple more times. We did a lot of Zoom, stuff. We did some basics on, like, let's just go line by line, for memorization, and then I would sort of quiz them on it without them looking at the page. And and everything. And that's sort of how that casting process went. It was sort of rapid fire, super quick. We needed to get them on board and to get them caught up to speed very quickly. And I think that winning their trust was a big part of them being able to feel comfortable enough that the person that was sort of leading the charge, that they could trust that person, and that they had their best interest in mind. And after that, they just rose to the occasion. They worked 12 hours a day, just like the crew. 14 if you want to count the hour it took to get there and the hour it took to get home. And they never faltered. And so it was just sort of a blessing from the beginning.
And the results, speak for that. It worked great. The film is, actually haven't seen the final cut, but I got to see earlier edits while you guys were working on it. Full disclosure, I've kind of on the inside a little bit here. What's next for the film? You had a screening in Los Angeles, right?
Yes, exactly. So people have just started to rally around this project. On April 24th, 2025, we had a kickoff screening in at the Regal Cinemas in Sherman Oaks. Sean Baker actually showed up to moderate our Q&A. Sean's a friend of mine over many years, last 12, almost 13 years. And when he found out what we did, he was just super impressed. He watched the movie and he was like, yes, I'm in. I want to get there. I want to support you guys. So Sean showed up. We had almost 400 people there, and it was people were laughing, and because it is a fun movie. There's
Mm-hmm.
the Blacklist sort of said it the best. It's like Plight wisely juxtaposes character-driven comedy with dystopian world building. And I think Ron was just a genius at the idea that people should have fun with the movie and that they shouldn't have to try to take it so seriously,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're allowed to laugh, especially because there's lots of jokes in the movie. And it's just through and through, the audience were laughing at all the right parts, and everybody loved it. And what's next on the agenda here is that we are launching a grassroots campaign to take free screenings around the country to this community, to the families of this community, to the community themselves. We've got a lot of sponsorship deals on the table. Like next week, I'm flying to Charlotte, North Carolina to speak with the VP of the Coca-Cola Foundation, who will, hopefully support us in that effort. It does cost money to put on these screenings and various expenses around that, but we wanted it to be free. We want that community to see themselves on the screen. And so we've got that campaign going, and in tandem on July 9th, one of my dear friends is one of the heads of HR for a bunch of particular verticals at
Mm-hmm.
Netflix. So July 9th, we're actually screening at the Icon Theater on the Netflix lot. They're super excited about it. They've seen the sizzle reels, they've seen the trailers, they've seen the behind the scenes. And every day, Akash Davda, that's his name, my buddy's name, just keeps sending me messages, and he's like, listen, man, everybody's super excited about this. So we've got a screening coming up at Netflix. We've got this grassroots campaign to take free screenings around the country. And then, we're just hoping that the movie gets out there to as many people as possible.
Cool. It sounds so exciting. Ron, obviously, you're very wrapped up in what's going on with the distribution and the promotion. But what are you working on otherwise? Do you have another project in the pipeline?
Well, I won't go into too much detail, but uh, one, I'm working on a sequel to Plight.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so the boys' adventure will continue.
Oh, that's exciting.
And so that's yeah, it'll be very exciting. I'm hoping to share the first draft of that in the coming weeks with Matt. So that will it'll be exciting for everyone. And just like the first one, we'll have a good time, but there's still going to be a serious plot. I am working, I think on I could talk about the other one which I've completed. It's called Notes of Autumn, and it's based in the 90s, and it's about a mother and a son carrying on a long distance letter writing relationship.
Hmm.
And so it just the story unfolds into him becoming a man and still having this contact with his mother, who's having a hard time navigate not having her son around. So it's just kind of falls back on a mother's love, and that it spans, thousands of miles. And I'll have more on that,
Yeah,
very, very soon. And
sounds
I think
interesting.
next week you and I are going to have a log line session next week,
One of our
regarding.
Get It Made logline pitch workshops. Yep.
Correct. Yeah. So
Cool.
we'll have more information on that one next week.
Awesome. As far as if people want to see more about the film, where can they go? Matt, where's the website and stuff?
Just go to watchplightmovie.com. So watch PLIGHT, watchplightmovie.com.
Cool. Yeah. So you'll be able to check out the behind the scenes stuff, and then you'll be able to keep up with if it's gonna be screened near you, hopefully. Cool. And Ron, Katrina, Matt, if people want to follow you guys, if they want to, keep up with what you're doing, where can they follow you online? Ron?
You can follow me on Instagram at Ron Sandy, Sandy like the beach, .ca.
Okay. Katrina?
I'm not very big on social media myself, but I do have a Twitter or a X, I guess, KDubs, KDUBZZ. But I encourage people to check out the Big Bend that's available for rental and purchase right now on all VOD platforms like Amazon, Apple, and YouTube, because it's just a great film. And it's another very, very scrappy grassroots indie film that I think also, these types of movies deserve to be seen. So thank you so much.
Cool. And Matt to Get It Made.
Yeah, to be completely honest, I can't stand social media. Just like Katrina, I think. But you can follow, the company Get It Made just by on Instagram by going to at getitmade.la.
Cool. And is the Plights on social media too, right?
Oh yeah, you're right. It's at Plight Movie. At Plight Movie.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here. This is a great discussion. I'm still looking forward to seeing the final cut of the film, since I got to have a little bit of input into some of the early cuts, and hopefully that won't be too long. Otherwise, we'll see you guys when you have other films and stuff coming out. We'll definitely have you guys back.
Thanks so much, Tom. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
this.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks,
No,
Tom.
thanks for being here. So do check out Plight at watchplightmovie.com and getitmade.la if you want to learn more about Get It Made. I actually have a link in the show notes for a discount off a 30-day trial of Get It Made. You can download the app and check out the program. For Writers Group Therapy, this is our last episode of the season. We'll see you in the fall. Until then, go to writersgrouptherapy.com and catch up on all our previous episodes. Thanks for listening.